I can't.
Hello and welcome to Game Changer Chats. I'm Tevis, the author of the Game Changer's Guide to Radical Success. And I started this series of chats because it really struck me that so many people who we meet are doing amazing things professionally, and they are not doing it just by checking the boxes. They're not doing it just by playing the game according to however they say it should be done. They're doing it by being true to themselves. And in a time when all of us are just watching the winds of mayhem blow around us, it struck me that it would be really helpful to all of us to be exposed to more conversations with folks like this and maybe stir these conversations in our own lives. So I'm really thrilled. I have Liz Crotty here today, who I'm thrilled to have with us. She is candidate for Manhattan District Attorney, which is a whole new conversation for me. And before we dive in, quick tech note. If you are here through LinkedIn, through YouTube, through Facebook, and you want to add in a comment, a question, a chat, please do. Sometimes the formats are glitchy and we don't actually see the comments, but I promise you, if we don't get to it live on air, it's because of a glitch. And we will both be circling back and going through the chat boxes and making sure that everything that's brought up gets addressed. So with that boring tech note, welcome, Liz. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our talk today.
Well, I don't know if you did any cheating on watching my previous. I've done 21 of these, and you're rounding out the move into the 30s and 40s as we're going to continue to do these. But I love to kick off these conversations. So often we get into an interview type situation and the mask immediately goes on, right? And we start to be that person we think we're supposed to be on camera. So I love to ask people, what is it that you loved to do as a child? What really brought you pleasure and joy?
Well, first of all, Playground 12 in Stuyvesant Town was the epicenter of my life from about 4 or 5 years old until I was about 12 or 13 years old. And I loved going to the playground. I love seeing my friends. I love going to the jungle gym. I love the swing. My parents live actually, when I was a kid, they lived at 3 Stuyvesant Oval and they had 15 Oval and they moved closer to Playground 12. But when I was a kid, it was about a 3-minute or 5-minute walk as opposed to right outside. They moved there when I was 12 and it kind of had missed its flavor to live right outside of Playground 12. But I liked going to the playground. That was what I decided that was the greatest thing ever. And you met your friends, played tag and tennis and tag and whatever. So it was fun.
So it sounds like the options appealed to you, and it also sounds like being with other people.
I've always been a people person. I've always liked people. I've always liked being with people. I've liked, I've always been a chatter. And I think I was one of those kids, the young, precocious 5-year-old who were I never know what she's quite going to say. I think from a young age, I was kind of my parents were what's going to come out of her mouth next? But I've always enjoyed people, and I've always enjoyed talking with people, and I've always enjoyed, hanging out.
Well, I love it that you were the random factor, right? The loose cannon, the no filter, just what's it going to say next?
I have to say, I do think it is genetic because I have 2 brothers and they also have that as well. So it's not just me, but we all do share that in common.
Is it the Blarney Stone? Because I feel like you told me you're Irish.
I am Irish, and although I have not kissed the Blarney Stone as one does when they go to Ireland, but I feel as though I have gotten it genetically. So 100%.
Through your blood. Well, so you're a kid going to playgrounds, doing whatever you can get into, saying things that are probably unexpected. How do you feel as your life has unfolded? I mean, you obviously became a prosecutor, a defender. But there's a big, huge window of Lizness on the planet in between this kid on the playground and now. And I'm just curious, what do you feel like you've always known is true of what it is just to be Liz? Like, what is true of you?
You can't be afraid to take chances. That's really my whole life. When I graduated from college, I moved out to Wyoming. I had a job at a fish factory or a fish hatchery. I don't know.
Cool.
I didn't actually end up ever getting the job, but explaining to my family that I was moving to Jackson, Wyoming, they were like, "Where are you going? Why are you going?" And I moved to Wyoming for a year. And then I came back and I worked in film and television in the city. I was always kind of like taking a chance and figuring it out. And then I decided to go to law school because I had actually interned at the DA's office in high school. In my high school in 1989, they decided your senior year, go out, do an internship. And I got an internship at the DA's office. And I loved it because I worked in property release. And this is the craziest story, but do you remember Morton Downey Jr. show? Yeah, right. So, and there was Paige Mellish, who was always on, and she was a feminist activist, and she was against pornography, and she always had these pictures, pornography pictures of saying how wrong they were. And she came in, and because they had seized her photos, and so I remember going home to my brother John and saying, "Oh my God, Paige Mellish was at the DA's office today." It was like a celebrity sighting, and I was kind of like, "This is a great job, and it's a great place to see people and learn about people." And and so I went back to that when I took the chances, and then even in my own career, when I became a lawyer. And then I started my own law practice, and that was a chance. It's kind of like, life is a series, and even deciding to run for office, that's going out and taking a chance. And life is a series of like, going to the abyss and just jumping down and seeing what happens. And I think you can't be afraid to take chances. They're terrifying. But it's kind of where the essence of life comes in. It's like, oh, I'm going to take that chance and I'm going to try it. And you're always richer for having taken the chance. You don't always get what you think you should, or it doesn't unfold how you think it will, but not being afraid to take a chance. And also really, especially for women, too, is like listening to your inner voice and really honoring that inner voice and saying like, oh, I'm going to do that, and not listening to the noise that comes up in life of all the reasons why you should listen to that inner voice.
Yeah.
There are times when you're like, well, I wish I had listened to that voice. Like, it's not a perfect outcome, but I do think like taking chances is kind of where we come at it from, developing an interesting life story.
So you're the kid on the playground, and if I had met you as another kid on the playground, we're about the same age. If I had asked you, what are you going to be when you grow up? What would you have said to me?
I mean, it probably depended on the day that you asked me, saying like, I'm short. Oh, he's changed, I was like, it was like, and quite frankly, I never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I was always perplexed by that because I was like, oh,
like what?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't have like a singular vision of life. It was kind of, when you're in job interviews and they were like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I was just like, I don't even know where I see myself next week. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like 5 years. And so, I mean, as you age and mature, that gets different. You do grow into your career and what you're going to do. But I just think like I never had a vision of my life, of what it was going to be and how it was going to turn out. And so I was kind of a little bit like, well, let's see where life takes you. Life is the exploration, and it's I was always that never. I think some people really like, I have a friend of mine, Jeremy Novak, who's always like, you need a schedule. He was like, you need a schedule. You need to like, this is the life plan. You're going to get married. You're going to have kids. You're going to get this job. And he lived his life that way, and he enjoyed his life that way. But I never had that.
That's interesting to me because so many studies, right, on leadership and greatness say, oh, well, you have to have a plan, right? Or you have to have a vision, and then you got to go for it and you got to push for it, etc. Whereas the path you're speaking of is kind of more one of being true to yourself and seeing where that takes you.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of life right now is right time, right place, right decision. And, it just comes down to timing. So, listen, if you're going for a leadership position like I am, you definitely have a plan. You have to put a campaign together and execute a campaign, and then you get the job and you have to lead an office. So, you can't do those things without a plan. But life is, there's an organicness to life that just doesn't, that is kind of plan proof sometimes,
Yeah.
like God laughs when you make plans or something.
Yeah, there was that Broadway show, and God
Yeah.
said ha or something.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I think yeah, it's that mix of like, yeah, if you're going to go for a leadership position, you have to definitely know how you're going to do it, and have a plan. But in terms of my life plan, it's just kind of always unfolded, and
Yeah.
so allowing it to unfold.
Yeah. That sense of allowing things to unfold, is that ever scary?
Oh, terrifying. Terrifying. Like 100%. Like, but what's the alternative? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just kind of like you the richness and the reward is kind of, you don't do great things without taking great chances, and you have to know that, and you can build that into life. But it's I mean, to decide to run for office is terrifying and overwhelming as a first time candidate, 100%. But like, you got to lean into it and just kind of embrace it and say, well, if it was easy, in all of life choices, and everyone's different life is like, if things were easy, more people would do it. There is an inherent difficulty to life, because you really have to work for things and make it work, and have a little bit of ingenuity, a lot of hard work, and a lot of luck. It's a factor of all those things. But I think that's what you have to do.
So when did this urge start to take form? Because it's an interesting time to be a first-time candidate, as you said, and hearing about this early experience in the internship for the DA's office. When do you feel like something started to gestate, that you felt like this was the way to use your one wild and precious life?
Well, I think what happened is, I've been a criminal practitioner for 21 years. So 6 years as a DA, and then I went to a firm for 2 years. And then I opened up my own law practice. So, and I've been a criminal defense attorney for 13. So I've seen what goes on in all the different borough. I don't really go to Staten Island, but the other 4 boroughs, I've seen what's going on there. And I watched the Queens DA race, and I just thought they were a little off the mark, to be honest with you. And I take what we do in that building, at whether it be as a prosecutor, as a defense attorney, as a judge. I'm on the judiciary committee as well at the city bar. I think each and every role is so important, and people come into that 100 Center Street, defendants, victims, witnesses, and their life is altered. And we really, you have a lot of power over these people, and how it affects their lives, and really recognizing the awesomeness of that power, and how much it can really individually affect someone, and being responsible with it and fair. It is really the heart of the office. And I think that that's something that was a little bit missing from the office. And that's why I decided, no, we have to do this. And you have to really speak up for all sides of the criminal justice system. And there's a lot of stakeholders in that. That's, the DA's office is just one of the stakeholders, the defense bar, defendants, police, judicial, it's so over. And I just thought I had a unique experience to bring to it, having been a prosecutor and then having been a defense attorney. And for the past 13 years, people have hired me, and I've listened, to individuals, and have heard the other side of the story in a meaningful way. And I think that experience and perspective it can really bring a lot of change to the DA's office in an inherent way. And I thought that was an interesting voice for it. So that's why I decided to do it.
One thing that we talked about, because we did chat really briefly on Monday, but one thing that we talked about was exactly that, the ability to really listen and to do so without judgment. Because everyone's got a different set of circumstances, etc. how do you think you learned that ability to just drop in and be present to what someone's experience is, or what their, I guess, worldview is?
Well, I think it's a skill developed over time. It cannot be taught. It has to be learned. And I learned it when I started as a young prosecutor, and I was doing cases, and I had a really hard time when I started becoming a prosecutor and doing misdemeanor cases, because I was like, wow, this is really heavy what you listen to. And I had some real heartbreaking stories, and I was like, oh, how do I help this person? And you really learn empathy and objectivity, and that is only increased over time. And when you come to becoming a defense attorney, you just really have to listen. It's a masterclass in how to listen to people and listen to the little factoids and innuendos, and listen for things, and you're a good defense attorney when you can really listen to somebody's story and remember that story. So when sometimes that story changes, you're kind of like, well, that's not what you said the first time. You know what I'm saying? And the ability to listen really is a learned skill. And I think that that's something I learned in a meaningful way as becoming a defense attorney. And a defense attorney really taught me that, and to be empathetic and objective, right? Because they're paying you, and you're becoming a defense attorney for your objectivity. And sometimes as a defense attorney, I'm always like, well, you have three roads. Either you're not guilty, or you're guilty, or there's somewhere in between. And then once we figure that what that is, then we can figure out how best to address this case. And, and I think that's my 21-year class, is how to listen to people and keep a little bit of a wall to keep objective. Because when you're related to someone who's been a victim of a crime, or you've been a victim of a crime, or you're a defendant, it intrinsically changes you. And so keeping a certain amount of objectivity to really not internalize that, and kind of say, well, here are the exterior factors, and pointing that out to people and it's a hard skill to do in an effective way.
One thing I'm hearing, because I love to listen as well, is that you've made a distinction between the listening with your brain and the listening with your emotional intelligence or heart. Right. And what I'm hearing is, as a defense attorney or as a human being, that what you've really had to hone is the ability to listen on both levels.
Right. Yeah. No, you have to listen on both. Like, listen, I was told that you have to know how to really empathize and connect with someone, because the more you can connect with someone, they trust you with their story, and that doesn't matter what side of the courtroom you're on. It's like, you have to build a level of trust to say, I'm here for the best interest. And how do you do that? And that's where the personal, the emotional IQ comes in, because if you can connect with someone in a certain way and say, okay, well, I kind of understand this aspect, and we can connect on that, but yet still remain objective to the overall fact pattern of what's going on in that individual case, keeps your, so it's really a balance of empathy and objectivity.
Yeah. Well, you also talked about, and I think this is something I'd love to hear you kind of unpack. A lot of jobs bring with them emotional baggage, right? Whether you're a social worker, a shrink, a school teacher, right? There are a lot of jobs that the human aspect can take its toll. And when you were talking about when you were first on the misdemeanors and you're really trying to help people, et cetera, that your passion and desire to do a good job would be such that you'd be like, oh. But how, as a human being, have you managed the emotional side of being so pivotal to what happens in someone's life?
As a defense attorney, you can ask a few DAs. They would probably say I didn't manage being so, because sometimes I get a little wrapped up in really kind of trying to defend people and saying, listen, you got to listen to this whole story. And, I've fallen victim of it myself, of getting wrapped up. There, some cases, listen, as a defense attorney and as a prosecutor, some cases just hit you harder. And, I had a domestic violence case when I was a DA, where there was an acquittal. And it was the first time I left the building because there's no crying in baseball, but I left the building and I was so upset. And it's really like, how do you not internalize that is very hard, because there's really sad things that happen to people, and they're trusting you either to defend them or to prosecute their wrongdoer, and it's hard. You don't always do it is the answer. You do your best, but you don't always do it.
So do you have practices? Do you go garden? Like what do you do with it? Because your nervous system, right? And your nervous system connects to your emotions, and it connects to your immune system. And
it's funny. I'll tell you a story. When I was at the DA's office, I became a runner. I became a runner. My knees and my age have given way to my running, but I was a real runner because there's a real meditativeness to running. And it was funny. A friend of mine from the DA's office was getting married in Boston, and a friend of mine from college was there before the wedding, and we were hanging around, and everyone's talking about their marathon and their run, and he's like, "Do you all run?" And I was like, "Yeah, there's a lot of running that happens when you're a DA, because it's a stress release, it's a meditative release, too." And or I remember when I was a DA and I was doing a trial. Sometimes you got your best summation on a treadmill, because you're just kind of sitting. It's a way to really clear your mind. And I think that's why exercise, honestly, is so important. And even to this day, when I went back and coronavirus happened, and I think this was, everyone would just go on these amazingly long walks, It's just kind of like, everyone's like, I just got to get out and free my. So I do think walking, and as we discussed before, I'd like to go, I travel a lot, and I like to go on hiking vacations. And I like, it's the dual-fold purpose of going places where my phone doesn't work and going places where you can be outside, because I really do think connecting with outdoors and outside is a pivotal thing to kind of putting life in perspective and all of the different things that one does. And I do think that's, running, walking, getting outdoors. It's really important.
Yeah. And so then walking the city that you love.
Yeah.
Probably have seen a lot of changes over the past year.
Yeah, no, it's lots of empty storefronts. It's sad. It's disheartening. Lots of mom and pop have not survived. Even corporate stores haven't survived. And I think that it's sad to see, but I always say, and my mother gets upset with me when I say this, but I was born on 14th Street, and I'm probably dying on 14th Street, and I don't have a problem with that. But I am a confirmed New Yorker. And so my point of saying this, though, is that New York might be down, but it is never out. And I think that there is a recalibration that's happening in this past year that we've all lived through. But yeah, I think it'll recalibrate again. And I think this was a forced recalibration, which has its definite pitfalls, but it'll come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Old and strong.
Okay. So you've got some guts, right? You've got some guts. You've got an ability to follow your own curiosity. You've got an ability to empathize with other people. And from what I understand, and I'm not a political expert, you're kind of the dark horse. And you're kind of the outlier. You're like, I don't come from a ton of money. I'm not part of the machine, right? And you did talk about taking risks. And you talked about hearing, oh, you can't do that.
Right.
So before we dive into you can't do that about this race, what's one of your proudest moments in your entire life where someone said you can't do that and you're like, watch me?
Well, when I ran the New York City Marathon. That's A. I mean, and run is a stretch. Jogs, maybe. Finish.
Walk.
I mean, like, life is a series of I mean, I have two brothers, so
I
have two
missed
brothers.
out on the brother. That's
You know,
what I missed out on is the brother thing.
I have two brothers, which are fantastic life training, you know, of terms of like, oh, you know, you can't do that. Like, watch me. I mean, that's where you become the sassy girl that I've kind of been my whole life. So I just think that was great. It's funny too. I climbed Kilimanjaro with my cousin Tom, and we had this seminal. I mean, it was so hard. Like you climb for 8 days, but the last day you leave at like 11 o'clock at night, and you hike up the last part of the mountain. That's very steep, and I think they do it it's a tourist capacity. I think you do it in the dark, so you can't see how steep it really is. So you don't. Your mind. It's kind of like your pack horses, and they just keep you going. So we had hiked from 11 until like 5 in the morning, and we get to the top, and we're up there, and I was like, Tom, we made it. He goes, and no one thought we would.
Your family didn't think you'd make it, really?
No, I mean, and this was like a literal conversation we had at the top of Kilimanjaro of like how we defied our family's odds and actually made it to the top. You know, and I was exhausted at the time. I was like, oh God, this was tough. But and my family, you know, our extended family, who's not usually so into it. I remember when we came back, they actually wanted to see the photos. We had a whole party where we put the photos on TV because the whole family was like, wow, that was impressive.
Finally impressed them.
Yeah, I mean, the stories are endless of times when people said, "Oh, you know, I don't know if that's the right thing for you," and I just said, "Okay, well, let's try it." So, so I think that's a lifelong thing. I think as I got interviewed by my high school magazine the other day, and I just think, you know, going to an all-women high school that I did, and you really learn to value your voice as a woman and to really know that every voice matters, and just kind of putting your head down and doing your thing is really how you make good results.
Yeah.
And
when I think about what's happened over the past couple of years, there have been a lot of organizations and articles that have really encouraged people from outside of the political world to get involved, and specifically, of course, women. And there has been a lot of a conversation about that. I know so many people who had never thought about it started to ask themselves, yeah, why not me?
right.
Why not me? I didn't go to an Ivy League school. And this whole notion that we have to have checked some kind of box to even have a fighting chance. I mean, how do you feel about all that? Because you have come in and you went to school in the city, right?
Right. Listen, I went to Fordham, which is a fantastic school, and I went to I loved Fordham. It was a great place for me, and I really came into my own in a way in law school that I didn't know that I could professionally and personally. And Fordham was a great place for me. And I think that you need, you know, I entered this race because I am the practitioner, that I have done close to 4,000 cases. And, you know, what I come and bring to this race is not in a supervisor's office. It's not academic. It's not a think tank. It's
not even political for you.
It's real life on the ground, and it's real life on the ground of having someone who has that breadth of experience to say, listen, we have to make the system fairer and equal justice and equal rights for everyone. And how do we do this? We have to level the playing field. And I've been going up against the DA's office for the past 13 years. So I fully understand. I not only understand and respect what their job is and what their role is, but I also understand where they're falling short of that, because I see what's going on in all the day-to-day cases, not the big ticket ones, not the publicity ones, but the real day-to-day cases, and how the everyday working of the office. And I think they can do better. And that's why I'm running. And it's a unique perspective. And I think I was saying this earlier today too, to another group, campaigns are just great for ideas. And no matter what happens in this race, and I do believe I win this race, but whatever happens in this race is that there's a lot of ideas that come out of campaigns. And if you take all the good ideas from the campaign, it will necessarily change this office for the better. And I think that's great. And I think the DA's office is what wins,
That's actually really true, because the campaign is nothing more than a highly broadcasted conversation.
Yeah.
So the passions and the interests and the angles, not only of the candidates, but also of the community, are brought to bear. I mean, look at the presidential campaign. It changed the national conversation.
Right.
And but I'm curious, like, just because you're a leader, right? You took it on. You said, I'm not just going to think about this.
Right.
Like, what would you say to people who are frustrated? Look, a lot of us are frustrated with our leadership in government. Like, what would you say to someone who stumbles on this in 5 months, or maybe they're watching now and maybe they've had a bug in their belly about being involved more than writing a check to someone who finds their email address, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I started going to political clubs. I've been going to political clubs for quite some time. So I
really,
yeah. And I got they're very interesting. And I think there's a lot of avenues for people to get involved. I went to my political club, figured out the landscape. I think their community boards in New York are really great places for people to get involved in their community. And I just think, I come from a family of public servants, and I have a long line of that. And I was raised in a way that I really respect public service and really respect what it does and appreciate what it does. And I have a great example in my parents, who both gave a lot of, and my brother and my grandfather, my uncle, I mean, everyone, and even my cousins, who, work in the court system and work for legal aid. I mean, everyone kind of plays their part. And I think that that's where I come at it from in playing my part is, you're there to serve your city. Like, I'm here to serve the city. I think that I bring a unique voice to this office, as a New Yorker, as a constituent, as a practitioner. And this is the office I'm running for. And this is how I can best serve my city, by this job, and bringing, 2 decades of experience to it, in the building in a different way that other people can. And that's where I come at it from, because we all, if you're concerned, you have to get involved. And if you're concerned with where it's going and how it's going, you have to get involved. And that's how I was raised, is my point. That's what I saw my parents do. And so that's kind of what led me to it. But again,
people, listen to her. If you're concerned, you have to get involved. And you did it by going to political clubs and hearing and being known, right? And starting to understand the conversation. Like, I think this is really important, because you have to step into the pool.
Yeah, no, you have to step into the pool. You have to be comfortable with your voice. And you have to be comfortable with your voice. And you have to be comfortable with the fact that not everyone's going to agree on everything. I think that's the biggest thing in politics today is, listen, we can all respectfully disagree, and disagreement is not a bad thing. What do we do with the disagreement? Where do we go with disagreement? How do we handle that? How can we work to come together? But, having 2 sides of a story and 2 sides of an argument makes resolving it that much better. And I think we've gotten in our national politics, we've gotten so divisive, and I think we're suffering as a group of people in that divisiveness.
Yeah.
And I just think, like, if you can kind of say, listen, I'm not afraid to disagree with people. I'm not afraid to disagree with people. And, I always say this.
So important, but what you said is so important, right? Because so many of us are afraid to speak up, or we're afraid to be challenged, or we're afraid to be disagreed with, etc. And I think having, like, the classic word I would say is resiliency, right? But we're also sick of that word for 8 million
Right.
other reasons, right?
Right.
But like that real ability to stand in your truth of your passions and your convictions, be disagreed with, and be willing to work forward from there. I mean, I think that's a skill that is not only so duly needed in the public arena, it's needed in our work lives, it's needed in our homes. Like, is it okay to really step forward and have a voice?
Yeah,
Anywhere
I mean,
you go.
yeah, you have to agree. Disagreement is part of life, and it is.
The
And
brothers. That's where the brothers come back into this.
yeah, like disagreement is part of life, and you have to be comfortable with it. And I've worked in an adversarial system for 21 years. Naturally, no matter what side of the courtroom you're on, somebody disagrees with the other side, and to the extent that you can work together and come together. And I think I'm an effective defense attorney because I understand what the DA's job is and what their role is, and I understand that sometimes I think that going forward, district attorneys and defense attorneys have to work more together to a common purpose of what's the best outcome for the defendant and the victim. But sometimes that's just at odds with each other, and you take it from there. But I do think being, I learned a saying very early on in my career that has really become a tenet of it's like, hate the game, not the player, and
Ooh.
yeah, hate the game, not the player. And, the game is adversarial, but don't hate the player, and respect the player, and treat the player with respect, and kind of agree when you can and work towards agreement. But sometimes it's just not going to work out that way, and be comfortable with that. Like, okay, we're just not going to agree.
Hate the game, not the player. So Liz, the woman, right? You're obviously no slump, long days. I'm sure, both as a prosecutor, a defense attorney, and having your own firm, which is not an easy lift for anyone. How do you still have time to be a human being?
I mean, you just have to carve it out,
Okay. Well, wait.
No, you just have to carve it out.
What does that mean?
But you have to take time. I mean, I think that's the difference too, as you age. I have a good friend of mine who works in tech and has been quite successful, and she's on she's so successful she's on her second sabbatical year. That's a nice success. But she's like, you really have to, you can work all the time 24/7, and it's only to your detriment. And sometimes you learn as you go that you work better and smarter when you work. You can't, just because you're working 24/7 doesn't mean you're working effectively and usefully. And so you really have to say, okay, sometimes, putting the phone down, taking the afternoon off, going for a walk. It used to be, I mean, if there's one thing I miss in coronavirus, is like, I miss going to the movies, like you read about, because I used to go to the movies, and there's something about, for me, going to the movies where you just sit in a dark room and you decompress, and that's, I think, what you're talking about is like, how to be human. And it's sometimes like that, just decompression from life is so I am very excited to be able to go back to a movie theater.
Yeah, it's so funny too. That's like a mini version of going off the grid and having people not being able to get you on your cell phone. For me, that was always hopping on a flight, right?
Yes.
Because your phone's off and there's a screen right in front of you.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the exciting thing about travel, right? Is you're just going somewhere else for a week, and you have no schedule. I mean, unless you're work travel, but like, you have no real schedule, and you don't have to be anywhere, and you can kind of take in experiences. And I think that's why traveling and exploring new places is so terrific. And I just think you have to carve it. I think you have to carve it out, and you have to make a conscious effort to be like, okay, this is my block of time. I mean, obviously, if you're running for office and running a business, you know, you just have to be happy with like a couple hours. And a good
a movie once they come back. Right? So what are the non negotiables for you? Things that you do carve out time for aside from the movie. Like, is it diet? Is it meditation? Is it yoga? You don't run anymore, you said, because your knees. I get it. I feel the same.
No, I've been a yoga. So I was telling you the story. Like, my friend Maureen made me go to a yoga class in my late 20s, and she had just moved back from San Francisco, and she said, "You got to come to yoga." And I was like, "All right, fine, I'll try it once." And then I went to yoga in my late 20s, and I really, it was really immediate, and I loved it, and it was fantastic. And I have, you know, my non-negotiable is I do yoga once a week. Like, you know, you have to, but also to get like, so I was saying to you is that when I went to my first yoga class, or my first couple yoga classes, you look around, you see some women in their 40s and 50s, which I now am one of those women. Wow, they look good. Like, they look healthy. They can bend over. They can do all these things. I was like, this is, you know, aspirational. This is what I want to be. And here it is. You know, I turned 50 and, you know, still doing yoga. Not, you know, to the same extent that I was. If I never do another wheel, I'll be happy.
My wheels are more often bridges these days, by the way.
That's the aged yogi in you, you know. Wheel becomes bridge, handstand becomes headstand. You know, where you used to, when I was younger and I was doing yoga, you were like perfect chaturanga, and you're like, go on my knees.
Knees just chin, fine.
But it's the ritual and the practice of it, you know, that I think. And also, too, I have a dog. So it's funny, in the pandemic, my dad called me the other day and he said, "Well, you didn't pick up my phone." I was like, "Dad, I was and you know, in New York, it's so funny because, you know, you're used to living your life and not talking to anyone. And then I got a dog, and I was like, all of a sudden it was like I had 20 new friends. And now I go to the dog run every morning, and I have my friends, and I don't answer the phone in the dog run, A, because it has crappy reception, but B, it's like, especially coronavirus, sometimes that's like your human to human interaction.
Yeah, for the day, or exactly.
For the day, you know, you're on phone calls and Zooms and things like this, but, you know, your human to human interaction gets a little limited sometimes. So you really, coronavirus has really made me cherish that. And so, you know, and I think that's what you know, nature and animals, they kind of bring you back to the basics. And, you know, I have a lab who needs to get walked every day. That's non-negotiable. Luckily, she's 10, so when she was a puppy, we really used to have to run 4 or 5 miles a day. Now we're both happy to walk down to the park and walk back. We've done our, you know, our daily.
She's not putting in the chaturanga either, is what I'm
No. So no, but I think that's where, you know, the carve outs are the rituals, you know, individual rituals of life, you know, where you think it's funny because I think sometimes you think they're like, you know, they're like pains sometimes, right? Oh, I gotta do this. But, you know, when you're not with them, you're kind of like, oh, I miss them. And it's funny because with the dog, even when I travel now, I get up and go for a walk every morning. Like, I'm so programmed for it because it's like, oh wow, this is what you do.
It's Liz.
Yeah, and I also think too, there's nothing better, you know, when you go somewhere you don't know, to just go for a walk and kind of wander around and check it out, and stuff, you know.
Yeah. So Liz, what's it really like to run a campaign?
I mean, it's great. It's putting a team together, and I've been really lucky in the team that I've put together, and, you know, they're really great. It was an individual approach, and they all bring something different to it. And so you have to put a campaign together, and you have to put a campaign together.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean, you have like a finance person, you have a communications person, you have someone who runs it all. You have, now, the interesting thing about this campaign, it's a 21st century. I say this all the time. It's truly the first 21st century campaign. Where it's all digital and it's virtual. And if I never have to say move the needle again in my life, I would love it. But what actually moves the needle and gets you out to people, and
you just said it.
I know, but it gets you out to people and gets you connected with people, and in a time when it's hard to connect with people, but running for office is all about connecting with people, so it's got its own challenges. So I think that's interesting, but I got really lucky with my team, and they're great. And a lot of campaigns or a lot of ideas and good intention, and then there's a lot of execution that has to go correctly, and a lot of luck that has to go. I mean, I think too, the one asset I had in putting together a campaign is that I started my own business. So so if I've started my own business and I've run a business for 13 years, you kind of get, how people work and what people want to do and how and it's just a synergy, and I think I just got lucky with my team. And goals, and also too, the other thing, and this goes to leading an office too, and managing people in a way and giving them the breath to be their best. I mean, those are really the best leaders, are people who say, I'm going to trust you to do your job, and I'm going to be here to support you to do your best. And if you do your best, we're all doing best.
Oh God, we could just put that on play, repeat, play, repeat, play, repeat. That idea of giving people space.
No, you have to give
them, right?
And you have to trust that they're going to do I've started my business with my business partner Jeremy Saland, and I've had 13 years of working out the kinks of how to start a business and keep a business going, and what that relationship is like. It's definitely got its highs and lows, and then going to that and putting a campaign team together, and how does that work, and trusting them to do their job and do it right, and kind of all believing that we can really do this and win, and which I think we have a unique team and a unique strategy, and I think it's a winning strategy. But you have to believe in people to do their best.
So let's say there's one thing that you feel like is most important to the well-being of New York City that you will have the ability to influence. What's that one thing?
Oh, I say this all the time. I did an op-ed about it. It's public safety. I mean, it's 100% public safety. I mean, 650 million people came to New York City in 2019 as commuters, tourists, and that we're losing millions of dollars a day in tax revenue lost from these people not coming back to New York. And they're not going to feel, if they don't feel safe to come back to New York, if they don't come back to Broadway and back into restaurants and back into hotels and come in to go to work, we're losing that money, we're losing those people, and it really drove an economy that hired all of us and that provided for families. And I think everyone needs to feel like this is a safe place, and this is a safe place to come back. And New York is down, and I believe crime is up, and violent crime is up, and I think we need to have honest conversations about that. But I think that if you don't have public safety, it drives so much else. I mean, if you think about it, I was thinking about it the other day, like the shoe bomber, right? We're still taking off our shoes at airports because one guy tried to blow up a plane with the shoe, and that's because, and so now everyone feels safe getting on a plane because they have to take. I find it inconvenient, but supposedly that's why we do it. And that perception of safety is just as important as the reality of safety.
I love that. Supposedly that's why we do it.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean that perception.
But I know us.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that that's kind of what we need to do, and it's funny because my campaign team I ride the subways all the time, and I was riding the subways.
Wait, I can't ride the subways.
Yeah, no, so I ride the subways all the time, and I had an incident in the late fall where I was in the train and nothing happened. I was like, oh God, I'm just going to start walking. And so I said to my campaign team, I was like, we got to start talking about getting more cops in the subway. And I also live in an area where there was someone pushed to the east side train station and the west side train station of me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I was just kind of like, this is crazy. Like, police don't need to make more arrests. They at least need to give the appearance of safety and protecting. And the job of the police is to protect and serve. So in December, I was like, we need more police in the subway. In January, I wrote an op-ed about it. In February, they finally did it. But, I come at it first as a constituent and as someone who lives an everyday life here. And so it wasn't some grand plan that it came out of. It came out of like my lived experience and saying, we need to do this. And so I think that that's kind of what informs the most is living life as an everyday New Yorker and what you see and how it affects things.
I do hear a lot of authenticity in that sense of, I may not be the DA, but I can share my opinion. Right. Yeah. So you wrote the op-ed, right? And
right.
Like that's really the kind of thing that I think all of us can learn from you, is whether or not you're in that place of power, there's a way to get involved.
Yeah, no, and everybody's opinion matters.
Yeah.
I go around and talk to different community groups, and I'm like 100%. I need your help to help get elected. But getting elected is really the first step. I mean, the third, fourth, fifth, sixth step is staying involved with community groups, listening to what's going on in different communities, and as DA, and how can I be an active DA within your community group and say, how can we help your neighborhood and what is going on in your neighborhood, and be responsive to what's going on in that neighborhood? Because it's not the DA who changes it. It's not the police who change it. It's not, local grassroots community activists, but it's all of us coming together is what changes it. It's a unified front and a unified action group that changes things. And I think that that's what really moves things along, and really, how you can promote fairness and transparency and accountability in an office comes working with all the different parties who are active in that office.
Well, that also speaks to having a sense of the long term, right? That it's not just the win. It's the relationship.
No, winning is. I mean, you say this as a candidate. Winning is the hard part. Like, winning is just step one. Doing the job effectively and making decisions and having the deep bench of experience is what is going to make the difference. And that's where I stepped in to say, listen, I have this experience for 20 years to bring to this office. And that's why it makes me, I believe, the best candidate for this, because it is that experience that's not hands off. It's very hands on and very in the courtroom.
So cool to hear you just own that. This is what makes me you people playing this. Think about it. Do you really stand in your truth that way? I mean, that's a gorgeous thing to be able to say something so unequivocally.
Well, that's running for office. I mean, if you don't believe in yourself, who's going to? And I truly believe I'm the best candidate. That's why I'm out there doing it. And, you talked about resiliency and how it gets overused, but the resiliency starts with you, and you have to own it, have it, and project it.
Well, I think all of us need a little bit more conviction around our own worth, right, is what I'm saying. And I'm definitely just hearing that and thinking, let's talk about imposter syndrome and not being equal to expectations from others, et cetera. And I really think that just hearing the clarity of your sense of purpose and your sense of alignment with the task in front of you it's just it's a teachable moment.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. I'm glad. And listen, if anyone, it's always a win if anyone listening to this decides like, hey, I'm going to go for this or I'm going to go for that. There's always a million one reasons why it won't happen. But the most overriding reason why things don't happen is if you don't try. So that's
You're making me cry, Liz. That's so beautiful.
No, but I mean it starts with you. If you don't try, it doesn't happen. So you have to try, and life is the journey, not the destination.
Well, I totally agree with you there. We're just about out of time, and we haven't gotten any questions on the chat, but I do want to say a couple things before I pop you a last question. I've got a course coming up on March 9th that will help foster in the people who sign up for it. It's a mastermind based on my book, and it teaches a lot of these ways of thinking and moving through life to be with that kind of conviction and clarity of purpose and freedom, because that's really what you have given yourself, and it's incredibly inspiring. So I'm going to put it in the little chat box, and my parting question for you is, where's the first place you're going to travel to when travel is safe again?
Oh, I don't even have to think about it because I've already decided. I'm dying to go to Japan. I've been dying to go to Japan for a very long time. So I'm dying for Japan. I think it's such a cool place, and I want to go and check it all out, go to Mount Fuji, do the whole thing. Japan is next on the list, 100%. I think it's great. And I'm upset that I haven't been there yet, but that's what's great thing about travel is there's always somewhere more to go.
Oh my God. Endless. Well, I am so grateful to you for sharing your story. And I wish you all the best. Bon chance. If there's anything I can do, you let me know. And I'm sure that the people who see this are going to get some good pause for thought about how to move through their own challenges. So thank you.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I did not give a plug to my website, which is lizcrotty2021.com. So if you like what you've heard, that's my website. I'm also on social media at lizcrotty2021. So feel free to follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And I look forward to hearing from you. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to hear what people think and what they think is what's speaking to them and what's not speaking to them. So I thank you so much for having me. This has been really great. It's nice to do something that is a little bit outside the box, different from campaigning.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks.